feel your fire, baby, let me dance to your love. I wanna feel your fire, rising from the flames. Your eyes only to burn again. Let me dance in the rhythm of your flame. If I burn, let me die to burn again. If I burn, let me die to burn again.
And welcome to Get Lit. I'm Blue Star Deerwomon, and my co-host is Rebecca Hahn. And today we have our gracious guest, Justin Deschamps. And this show, as you know, or may not, is dedicated to Julian Robiles. And I'm going to suggest right now, for all you ones out there that have known Julian and have great love for him, everyone take a deep breath. Just keep breathing and let's stay present. I know I have a lot of emotional energies moving through me, and I feel very shamanically connected. And today we are going to hold the intention that Julian is right here. He's present with us, and he's listening, and I see him with a big grin on his face. And I want to also commend and honor Justin emotionally, spiritually, for being able to be present and to share with all you loved ones how this transition is happening in this moment. I also want to acknowledge when I took a walk today and I went to spend some quiet time conversing with Julian, that droves and droves and droves of other spirits showed up that apparently are in transition. My own ancestors showed up, and they all wanted to come here today, and they want the same prayers that we will share with Julian. And I had put in the Facebook that I'm influenced by the Buddhist tradition when it comes to death, and I'm very eclectic in it. But one of the understandings in the Buddhist tradition is that, we're talking about spirit and consciousness, and that consciousness is always present with us. And right now, they consider this a very critical time to continue to hold a lot of love and comfort and ease for a loved one who has transitioned, that it is in the consciousness, and that although we don't know all of what happens there, they actually practice this vigil for like 49 days. But the truth is, you can continue to talk to your loved ones that have transitioned 30 and 40 years ago. So take a moment and think of your loved ones who have transitioned or are in transitioning now, and just talk with them and continue to share the love. So we're going to intend that this is a very safe and nourishing environment. And we are dedicating it to Julian and all the spirits that are needing this kind of attention and love throughout the world. And I just want to tell you a quick exchange I had with Justin and Rebecca right before we came on, is that I had a very gorgeous gay brother, one of the, just top drag queen. And he passed over years ago because of AIDS. I'm out on the land. I'm in this teepee with crystals hanging. I'm talking to spirit. And my brother shows up, and he looks at Julian and he goes, "Oh my gosh, is he forever cute?" And Julian got a big shit-eating grin on his face. And the two of them were just in spirit. It was just delightful. And it just filled my heart. And I just cried and cried. It was just a beautiful experience. So let's open ourselves to those beautiful experiences. And as we hear our spirit friends and family, send them great love. And so now I'd like to have Rebecca share where she is in this moment. Thank you.
So I just want to say welcome everyone to Get Lit today. And just to give you a little background, if this is your first time tuning in with us, last week we had Justin and Julian on the show, and we were speaking of discernment and its aspect to shifting our belief systems, letting go in terms of research, and giving ourselves the ability to flow consciously in a way where we continue to grow, whether in life or death. And a day after that, Julian passed. And I've never actually met them in person, just through communication via Facebook and last week on air. And so it was this really interesting, shocking thing for me, because this person just stepped into my life and then they step out. But what's even kind of more interesting about all of this is that for about 2 months now, Blue and I have been putting this theme out there around conscious death. And we have been prompted to continue to explore this. When it was brought up as something we wanted to explore loosely in one of our broadcasts, it was unbeknownst to us that it would continue to deepen and grow. And kind of, we don't scare easily. We don't, but it's gotten to the point where there's so many synchronicities around this topic that we continue to be fed from it. So we continue to address it. And the first broadcast we did around it was about, we were both kind of cocky, sacred clowns. Yeah, we know what's going on with conscious death, and this is what it's all about, people. This is what's going on, and you need to learn from us. And because we're just that way sometimes. And every week we would come back and go, what do you want to talk about this week? And every week it was like, we're not done with this yet. And I know that Blue has experienced the passing over of people that have been really close to her, as well as I have. It's sort of been a theme in my life. And it's been thankfully approached fairly spiritually from the people that I've passed over. And in fact, Blue and I sat vigil over someone passing together several years ago. So it's kind of a theme that's not leaving us. And we saw the transgression and the deepening and the metaphor around this topic in both our lives separately over the course of the past 2 months, as well as together. And if you've watched some previous broadcasts, we're very esoteric about it at first, and talking about artificial intelligence and our mind stream, and having a conscious death is all about being able to hold on to that mind stream and that soul into the next life and not be manipulated to more concretized ways of dealing with it on an emotional level, like how we don't address death and how we run from it, and how every moment is a conscious death if we choose to have it be so. And then we had an episode which I would love and encourage you to go back and listen to. We'll put up what episode it was, but there was this whole mythological story that Blue experienced around a snake that she eventually had to kill on her land. And how at first I was very like, yeah, kill the snake, it's poisonous, it's dangerous. And it became this amazing lesson for us in letting go and being the snake and not fighting death and not fighting letting go, and being so peaceful in his process for a week, caught in a net, being one with the process and being okay with saying to Blue, you're not killing me. I'm choosing my own conscious death at this moment. To when I went to my Buddhist retreat, not knowing what the topic was, and the topic was experiencing a conscious death. That's exactly what the title of it was, where this Buddhist nun had said, our Rinpoche for our Buddhist sect is encouraging all of us across the world to teach about conscious death. And here I am going, that's what I'm called to do at this moment, and it won't let go of me. To last week, having Justin and Julian on the show, which then was a process, looking back on it, of someone, this amazing, special person, choosing to experience his own conscious death, to create a capstone around our last broadcast that sort of memorializes the beginning of a process of us being able to witnessed his own conscious death, which brings us to today. So if you're just tuning in, last week, unbeknownst to any of us, the sacred joke is on us, that I think if we would have known going into this topic 2 months ago, let alone going into the interview and sharing time last week, I think we would have all run terrified away from that episode, knowing what the end result would be. However, the universe is brilliant and spoon feeds us that which we cannot digest in this conscious human experience. And so I am feeling incredibly blessed that I am not too smart and not too aware, because if I was, I would have run scared away from his choice to use that platform, whether he knew it or not, to teach us all something so magnificently brilliant that Blue and I have been asking to have come to the table for us. And he gifted us with such a profound gift. And I think today, again, is a deepening of that if we were aware and checked off the menu items of what we wanted to cover on the previous/future shows, it would not have looked like this. And it would not have been as deep and authentic. And the ways of the world the universe, to me, are so fabulously brilliant that every moment, whether we're in a pot of boiling water or frozen in our own shit or living the life of our conscious dreams, the universe is brilliant. And I have such a wealth of emotion around this because I feel like I've been gifted something through this experience. And I want to encourage everybody watching as well to take this opportunity not to run from what our conscious mind has built the belief system around what death is, whether it's, giving up having to go out to dinner because you need to do something, which is a little death, or something that is the ultimate conscious death, which is what Julian did, which is letting go completely of this body, or us experiencing letting go of him in this body and understanding, as he said at the end of last show, I'm not quoting it correctly, but none of it matters because there's no such thing as death. And we had no concept of really what was coming in less than 24 hours from that. So I've had a lot of experiences around death. And when my father died, he said to me, prior to him dying, he said, Rebecca, I'm not dying and I'm not leaving. I'm just taking another journey and you will be with me. Because he was actually kind of a world explorer. And that shifted my mindset. And then he handed me the Tibetan Book of Dying and said, read this. And I didn't until after he passed. And I was 16. So, I should be an expert at this by now. And yet I woke up shaky and feeling really open and incredibly grateful for Julian's brilliance and choice to show us what a conscious death is. And I hope that this show and last week's show will give everybody, including us on the broadcast, a different way to experience the process of death and dying and the process of letting go, and view it more as an enriching, transformational experience, and allow us to practice the little deaths along the way so that when we get to these big ones, that we can actually look at them as a gift and a tool for transformation. So I'm feeling full and in so many ways with sadness and just complete awe of the kismet and coincidences, and in complete awe of Julian and Justin as well. And I know that before we got on air, Justin mentioned that he's like, you wouldn't believe the coincidences and, as I say, the kismets that are occurring since his passing, and I would love to hear some of your experience and what those are. So.
Yeah, sure. Thank you both for giving me this opportunity. When you originally asked me a few days ago, if I wanted to do this, I wasn't really sure, and it's been a roller coaster of emotion and adjustment since everything happened. And actually, we don't know if we mentioned this the last show, but the last show was the 22nd episode, which was on August 22nd, and Julian's numerology number was a 22. So, I mean, it was just non-stop synchronicity after synchronicity. And, after the show, we both, agreed that was a really good show. And so, yeah, it's been so many different moments. I mean, I'm kind of not sure where to start. I'll just say, just for clarity, that Julian actually, on Sunday, the next day, he had some trouble with his heart. His heart started beating really rapidly, and he had trouble breathing about a week before. He couldn't take deep breaths without being in pain. And we had actually brought him to the emergency room twice on Friday. And the doctors didn't really want to listen to his condition because he did have blood clots in Morocco. He just recently had one a few weeks ago. And so anyway, he had some trouble on Sunday. And he thought he could, meditate and calm himself down. He thought he was just anxious about something. And, the next day, we actually did a recording with No Master, No Slave, with this other two wonderful podcasters. So that's actually the last recording show that we ever did together, which was nice. And, and that night, he went into the hospital, and, the doctors were fighting us, saying, well, no, it's pneumonia, there's no blood clots, everything's fine. And it wasn't until after the pneumonia treatment wasn't working that they finally did a CT scan, a CAT scan, and discovered that he had like 2/3 of his lungs were filled with blood clots. And he burst into tears, and he didn't want to go. But I had this moment with him after he found out, and I held his hand and I said, no matter what happens, we're going to get through this, and there's nothing that can separate us. Nothing. And I left him that night. He looked like he was doing better. They put him on the treatment, and I remember sending him a message when I got back to the house saying, I loved him and I'd see him the next day. And then obviously everything happened before I even got a chance to go down there and talk to him. He had already, his heart had already stopped. So, and in that moment of the doctor calling and telling me that his heart stopped and they were trying to resuscitate him for a half hour, I mean, it was just, there was so much that had been brought up to the surface. I mean, we talk about catalyst, and the Law of One talks about this, but I mean, generally speaking, when you have an experience, depending on what the kind of experience is, it'll literally bring and weave in all of these different things into your life that you just didn't even know were weaving into each other. And in that moment that I knew that something was not right and that he may not be back, it was like my whole world just completely fell apart, and I just like collapsed onto the floor. And all of the spiritual training and experiences I've had were there, but it's like it's almost like you're in life, you always have the past meeting the future in the now. And there's all these things that I thought, oh well, I could, I know that there's no death, and I know that there's really no loss. But at the same time, I didn't know. And it was such a merger of all of that coming in all at once. And it was literally like, for me and myself at that moment, that I didn't admit to myself that he was actually gone yet. And we went to the hospital. I'll tell that story in a minute. But in that moment, a deep part of myself knew that this was a huge, huge moment of transformation for me. And Julian had been the catalyst in my life at this moment. So, looking back on it, I feel this huge amount of reverence and gratitude that, I mean, we were able to do so much, and that he basically, like you were saying, he gifted me this amazing opportunity to reground, reaffirm, and let go of all these things about life and death that I didn't even know were inside me. I didn't even realize that that's what, my beliefs were. So I'll tell the experience. We went to the hospital, and basically the whole hospital was in the room trying to do everything they can to bring him back. And, I was a wreck. I was crying my eyes out. And, I stood over him and I held his hand. And my mother said, pray to him, because she was with me, thankfully. She said, pray to him to, contact him. And I closed my eyes and I held his hand and I prayed. And, I said in my mind that, God, if this is meant to be, then I accept it. But if there's anything I can do to bring him back, if he needs to hear my voice, if I have to send a siren call from my heart to his heart to have him come back, then, I'm going to do that right now. And in that moment, I got this vision of Julian enshrouded in light. And he kind of he didn't touch me physically, but I just felt like a connection immediately. And he said to me, I'm not coming back, but know that I love you and this isn't the end. And in that moment, it was like half of me was hugely relieved that I had that connection. But the other part of me that was still grounded in, the illusion and materiality, it was like I was looking back in the past, but also looking into the future. And there was this huge conflict because I didn't want to lose him. I didn't want him to go. There was so many things that we were going to do. I mean, he hadn't seen snow in years. He wanted to take photography of the leaves changing. I mean, there's just so many things. And so in that moment of me ephemerally accepting that he had transitioned, it was like I was reborn. And I came into a whole new perspective of my life that, I just took for granted. Because anytime you're in a routine of anything, there's normalization. It becomes regular, and it's a pace of your experience, and you don't even notice that there's very special moments happening all the time. And once I finally started to accept that this is what was happening, it was like our relationship life had flashed before my eyes. And all of these moments that at the time I didn't notice because it was routine became so incredibly special to me. And it was almost like in that moment of transformation, I had so much love and reverence for him and what he had done for me in my life that could never have been attained if he had come back. So it really taught me, in hindsight, that this is a huge gift that he has given me, and an experience that I'd never had before. I'd never lost somebody. I mean, I lost my grandfather when we were in Morocco, but I kind of knew he had Alzheimer's, and he's been declining for a few years. And I actually got an experience where I got to say goodbye to him, and I had this intuition that, I wasn't going to be able to see him. So, and he had Alzheimer's to the point where he wasn't recognizing anybody, but that day he recognized me, and we kind of had this eye-to-eye contact. And in my spirit I said, you'll always be with me, and I know you're going to move on. And it was the same type of experience with Julian. So and that, I mean, the synchronicity at that day, I'll just say that he had a good friend several years ago. I don't remember the exact year, but her birthday was on the 25th, and she passed, and she was one of Julian's death experiences. So in the sense that somebody deeply, you connect with them, you have a relationship with them in the point where you're actually meeting them in the physicality, you're able to exchange energy from body to body, so to speak. And that's a different kind of experience, I would say, than, somebody you haven't seen for years, but you maybe knew when you were younger or whatnot. So for me, that it was almost as if she had, come to embrace him and carry him aloft in that whole experience. And for the first 3 days, it was just a roller coaster. It's still a roller coaster, but last night something beautiful happened, and I was just so grateful. I'll just tell you, Julian's family came up. His mother, his brother and sister, and his grandmother, they were here on Thursday, and they left yesterday. And we got to go see him at the hospital, in the morgue and whatnot. And I didn't know how I was going to be able to handle this experience. But I just had so much tremendous bravery from dealing with him passing in general. I felt like I could do anything at that point, And that was that in that moment when we left, we went in, and it was a big, emotional experience. Everybody's crying. And then we just started remembering him and all the things he did, and, and sharing the love that we had. And we were just laughing and crying tears of joy. And it was just so beautiful. And it was one of these moments, like you were saying before, where had I known what was going to happen, I would have run for the hills. I never would have done that. But there's a choice where you can fear the unknown or you can embrace the mystery. That's what I like to say. And I've learned so much how to embrace the mystery from this experience. So we had that experience in the hospital, and we spent the next day making arrangements and whatnot. And they left, and Julian and our lives were completely intertwined. Everything from the moment I woke up to me making hot water on the stove. I'd make extra hot water from him. Everything was completely intertwined. So literally, it's like every moment of my life, I'm facing this transformation, and that's really what it is. I've learned to focus my mind more on what that means, the transformational aspect, than focusing on what is not there, the scarcity, the loss, the separation. And for me, that has been huge, because it's something I've intellectually, I've come to that understanding, but now I've literally got an experience that completely eclipses all other potential experiences. Really, like I said, it was like from the moment that I knew that he wasn't coming back, it's just been one transformation after another, after another, after another. And I never would have had that opportunity had this not happened. So last night they left, and the house was empty, and for the first 3 days I've just been feeling this like hole, like he's not here. And and usually it's because I'll see a picture, or I'll see his computer on the desk, and I know it's the one he used, and it just reminds, and I think back into the past, and then that puts in context that he's not here right now. So what it does is it creates this consciousness of lack, of scarcity, and last night I had this moment where I was imagining the future, imagining being at the memorial and sharing the experiences, and how much he's touched the lives of so many people, and what his passion was, and helping this world and helping others, and and it, for the first time in the 3 days, I actually felt good about looking into the future, which it was really difficult for me to do that, because everything in our lives was intertwined in that respect. And
so Justin, and that's the intention today, is that we know Julian's spirit and consciousness is present with us now, right? And you're so beautifully articulating, yes, we have a material, emotional relationship. And these are the things that we either are attached to or not, but these are the things we have to let go of. And eventually, those spirit, Julian's still sitting at that computer. And that beautiful exchange that you had, I have experienced that so many times with loved ones that have passed over. For whatever reason, I've had a lot of death, and I've been beside a lot of people in transition. And that voice, they can do that. They can say, I love you, and I need to go. And I had a grandmother, and my mother said all my life, oh, she's a witch, you know, and she was. But she was extremely psychic, and I had heard she ended up in the hospital. She was in her mid-80s. I was out in California. I had to get to New York. I'm on the plane, and I heard just as clear as a bell, my Amy said to me, she just said, I can't hang on any longer. I love you. And sure enough, she transitioned while I was in that flight. And that is that thin veil that I think is going to continue to give us courage and strength to move through what is this transitioning about. So I just wanted to offer that and give you a moment, a breath.
Yeah, thank you. That you're absolutely right. I mean, I wouldn't consider myself psychic necessarily, or anything like that. But as I look back into my life, and I'll kind of get into that in a little bit here, but I realized I've been getting huge amounts of intuition and precognitions about many things, not just Julian's passing. And it kind of gave me, I needed the perspective to look back and really honor all of these experiences I've been having. And I think all of us have that ability. It's not that, any of us are necessarily special, but you've got to be willing to embrace that aspect of yourself. And and that's kind of what I was about to get to, is that last night I've been trying to go through all the emails and the well wishes, and there's been so many people that have poured out their love and admiration, and people that we didn't even know had been following us, and that we get messages like, you guys have been such an inspiration for me for a year. I was having a really hard time when I found your blog and your work, and both of you inspired me so much. And and Julian would be so happy to hear. Every time somebody sent us something like that, he was just, the biggest smile would go across his face, and he'd be a little more motivated to do something, and myself included. But so I was reading through those, and for the first time in 3 days, instead of feeling sadness when I saw his picture, I just felt this overwhelming joy. Like he's literally become my saint, my guardian angel in passing. I mean, it just blew me away. And I never, like you were saying, I never would have had that consciousness had I not had this experience.
Yes. And that's why, I mean, when I took my walk, I mean, I'm visiting with my ancestors all the time. And there was my brother, it made perfect sense. It was like, oh my gosh, Kenny, you're here. And he says, are you kidding? Why would I miss this? And that was something that, for whatever reason, my mother had the chutzpah to cultivate this understanding of death and transition. She says, she says, I'm going to keep talking to you after I'm gone. And my brother did the same thing. I was very close to Kenny, and he chose to die 2 days after my birthday. And I know that there was a significant, that was his way of telling me, I want to stay really, really close to you. And I had the experience with Kenny. He was a comedian, a stand-up comedian, and he was all about glamour and on the stage and what have you. And shortly after, I started laughing like my brother. I took on a certain laughter and mannerism. I actually became this kind of a faggot, and I know how to fix curtains and things like that, and fix, your scarves, but it's not in the typical feminine, womanly way. It's like as a gay guy. So, I mean, I'm even talking a little bit like him right this moment. So there are some amazing integrations that happen if we're open to that. And another one, I want to share this because this was pretty significant too. When Kenny passed over, I had an experience, and I didn't know it was happening to me. My friends had to, and I had lots of shamanic healers around me at the time. And it was about the 4th or 5th day, and I couldn't function. It was more than grieving. It was like I lost my functionability. I didn't have an appetite. I lost my coordinates of you wake up in the morning. Hey, you usually like to have coffee, and I couldn't seem to get grounded. And finally, my healer friends identified, they said, sister, you went over to the other side with your brother. You're still dying with Kenny. And it was absolutely true. I was so close to him. I went with him. And it was almost as if my friends had to do almost a soul retrieval. Well, first of all, they had to ask me, do you want to come back? And it was almost as if I was going to be in this body, but I wasn't here. And they had to facilitate through shamanic ways to bring me back and continue to affirm, I'm here, Penny's with me. But there was a very serious crossing over, and I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that. And I feel like I have that space is open now. And that's how I went, how I'm visiting with Julian. It's like, I'm not giving away my physical being, but I do have the sensation in my being that allows me to go between the worlds and really feel in that oneness. So I think there's a lot of beautiful, beautiful things that as a culture, we're not getting anywhere near. And you're beginning to address that. It's like Julian's spirit is going to be everywhere you call him in. And that's why I'm saying right now, I really want our listeners, think about your loved ones or those that are going through, and bring them close in and start to open yourselves to those very beautiful messages that are on the subtle plane. But they can. I mean, I'm giving you examples. I took on characteristics of my brother. He literally, and maybe that goes back to our AI, but he literally got in this physical being and my DNA rearranged. So I did want to just share that.
So can I just say one thing to you? I keep hearing you say, it took me 3 days to feel the gift of this passing. It took me 3 days to not feel a sense of loss and scarcity. It took me 3 days. And I just want to speak to the brilliance of both of you, because most people will go, it's been 20 years and I'm still. It's been 30 years and I'm still. And don't you think it should be over that by now? It's been 15 years. So I just want to commend you for, every moment of your life that you have made choices to go deeper, and to be a truth seeker has led to this moment of how brilliant you are in this circumstance, because you keep saying, it took me 3 days. It takes some people more than a lifetime to get to the place that you are right now, to see the gift and the richness of this experience. And so I want you to just be easy and breathe with that, and know that it's not just this moment in time. It's every moment that you have made a choice in your life that's led to this moment in time for you to experience something quite mundane as death, because I'm going to call it mundane because it's really something that happens to everybody. But you've been able to experience it dualistically. This is what I'm seeing and hearing. You're allowing yourself to be human, and you're allowing yourself to be profound and spiritual. And there's no judgment around when you make that choice. You were talking about feeling grief-stricken and fighting against the belief that he had passed, and trying to reintegrate that and fighting against it and crying your eyes out. And it struck me a couple of things. One is that it's amazing how you're allowing yourself your human moments, because guess what? You're human. As spiritual and as transcendent as we become, we are still experiencing egoic human nature. But that you can be your own observer self and go, I am in the muck of my lower centers. I'm in the muck of my darker emotions. And I'm going to honor and experience that, because if I don't clear this and move this, there's no space for me to understand or experience the gift of this. So I think that's such an amazing gift to everyone who's listening and watching, to realize that it's neither here nor here. It's both. And which one serves us at any given moment? I think that we have gotten into this whole idea of spiritual as a trend, where people have bystepped and ignored the lower centers and the lower emotions, and everyone goes, I'm enlightened, I do yoga, or I'm unattached because I'm a Buddhist, or I choose not to experience that because, or I shouldn't be grief-stricken when someone in my life dies because I understand the process of how angels, So we've kind of negated our human experience in so many ways. And if we actually fall into the depths of that human experience, we judge ourselves. And so listening to you speak about how you, because of all the work you've done up until this moment, and the two of you did together, that you're able to live in the duality of your higher self that understands the bigger picture of this and the transformative nature of it, but also to be like, right now I am in the shit and I need to experience this, because that's also honoring the process. And I think it's a great reminder in general on how to be human, because I can be angry with you, and it's okay for me to be angry, and it's okay for me to feel that. But it's also a good place dualistically to live and say, instead of saying something that's horrible and mean, to say, this is what I'm experiencing. The need to be horrible and mean because I'm angry, or so joyous that we become manicky because we haven't dealt with what's underneath it. So to look at that and go, oh, I'm experiencing an inauthentic form of joy to cover up this other stuff. And so we've been speaking for so long about this idea of conscious death and death and dying. And, as I said, joke's on us, because we're actually learning more than we ever thought we could. And, we've come to some conclusions. And now that I've gone deeper into the study of death and dying and in my Buddhist retreat, one of the things that Blue and I connected on was how expansive our consciousness is right before death, and how our entire mind opens up to every moment of everything surrounding us. So we can absolutely be the multitasker on a conscious level, a spiritual level that we never were able to gain in this human form, that was grounded in this human form. So our conversation Blue and I had one time was, we would love to get our mind to a place where we can live in the moment right before death, where our whole entire being opens up and lights up and is surrounded by this golden light everybody talks about. But the golden light is actually coming from ourselves. It's not coming from something outside ourselves. And I know Blue and I had an experience where we sat vigil in support of a man who was losing his wife, and asked us to be there through the passing. And she was in bed struggling with her own passing for several days, and we sat with her and supported her psychically, physically. And there was several times where she would come to consciousness and look out the window of her bedroom, and it was at the very moment her husband happened to be walking outside. And I thought, how in the world does she know that he's out there doing this? And now it makes sense, in the sense that when we are in the moments before death, our consciousness opens up to a place where we can see all and be all and know all and be completely awake and aware. So what stops us from being that throughout our lifetime in this human form? And I think it has so much to do with the belief systems that keep us safe, and the ego in relationship to the spiritual or the authentic, in a way where our understanding of the ego is feed it what makes it comfortable and let it overrule our spiritual self, or else we get really uncomfortable. And through my studies, my belief has been, let the ego becomes so supported in what it does that it lifts itself up and meets our spiritual self, and it meets that place. And I think
Exactly.
that place for me used to be about just being a high functioning dualistic, I can be my spiritual self and my raw self and observe but now I think it's become, in this process with you and with Blue, and it's become about those moments just before death where your consciousness is completely connected with the ego in such a pure way that you don't live dualistically anymore. They're fully integrated. And I guess the bigger question, which is left to be seen, is what else is stopping us from living a life that awake? And, you know, we all have some thoughts on that, which we can talk about. But the other thing is, how can we get there and live our life that awake and that conscious and that pure, that we can see all and know all and be all, so that when we do pass, we're just leaving this body and everyone around us has a conscious connection to us, not in this physical form, but that we continue our mind stream when the body is even gone. And it's such a profound examination through your process of, it's been 3 days, and I mean, this is a new human that you are a new human experiencing this consciousness. This is a completely different way of experiencing transformation through letting go. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the lesson. And part of me is fearful to even say, what the fuck is our next show going to be about? You know, it's like, is the whole continent going to fall off? You know, Are we going to, like, what is this thing about death right now? We've lost a snake. We've lost our own belief system. We've lost our ability to hold on to inauthentic, bullshit. And then we lose a friend. I thought the snake was a big deal that we lost. And so, what's the next one going to be about? But this idea that, can we get to a place in this lifetime, in this human body, where we can have such a glowing, beautiful mind stream and not have to wait till the 5 minutes before death to invite, as you were invited into his consciousness.
Okay, I got to say
and
something
ourselves. Yeah.
Because, okay, you're asking the question, and I feel Justin is giving us a sample.
Yes.
All right? Justin, you're sitting there, and we know his values spiritually. We know his understanding and exploration. And you're also sharing with us, okay, he's not there. I fell to my knees. I was crying on the floor. And I think one of the significant pieces here is you're not resisting your emotions. You're not afraid to grieve. You're not afraid to get pissed off. You're not afraid to feel the absence. You're not afraid to be alone, or you are afraid to be alone, but you're embracing that. At the same time, exactly. I think the kernel is, you heard Julian tell you, I'm not coming back and I love you. And that's inside you. Mm-hmm. And that's where you crossed over. And, I don't want to go on too long about that, but just the greater picture, we have not been, it's another part of enslavement to keep us afraid of the fact that we can traverse multidimensionally. But death has been put on this fear place, and it's hijacking our spiritual understandings.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the big thought form or philosophy or theme behind all of this is, and that's brought me a lot of comfort and understanding, is, what does this all mean? I remember having experiences very young, like 5 and 6 years old, when I didn't grow up very religious, but my parents exposed me to spirituality. And my father was, he believed in a creator, but he didn't necessarily ascribe to any religion. And I remember having many experiences where I would learn something, or I'd have an experience, and whatever I learned, I would use. And I kind of developed this idea that everything that I'm doing, everything is for a reason. I just have to try to open myself up to finding out why. And really, that to speak to the duality aspect of it, part of me part of me still says, no, I don't want you to go. Why can't you just, ring the doorbell and I'll give you a big hug and a kiss and, invite you in. But the other part of me, when I'm willing to let go and not be in scarcity and lack, I finally start to, it's like literally the scarcity, like it blinds you to what's happening. It's like you're trying to cherry pick part of your experience that you're holding on to, and you ignore everything else. And when I'm in those moments, that's when it's the most painful. That's when it hurts the most. But when I'm finally able to let that go and open my mind to, well, what has this taught me? How am I growing from this experience? That is when everything gets transcended.
Right. And okay, now, if you back up from what you described, because you are really in an experience of an actual physical death, and I'm hearing Julian, he asked me to give him more information about conscious dying when we were in the last show. Okay, if you back up, everything you're talking about where we can become conscious in conscious dying is asking those very same questions. When we lose a house or we lose anything, okay, it's that scarcity again. It's like, because we're in the scarcity of, oh my gosh, I don't have the house, we're not allowing ourselves to just flow and feel and go to and let that spaciousness, let the kernel of the gift come through. And so to me, conscious dying is just stepping backwards for a moment. All right, it may not be a physical death of a friend, but you can apply it to the death of absolutely everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Whether that death is just a moment of not feeling like you have a choice to do what you plan to do and letting that go, or, we wouldn't look at a flower that we picked and say, don't leave. You can't wither away. You have to stay exactly as you are forever.
Yeah.
And you can't go away. We don't do that with a flower. We appreciate its beauty in its vase, and when it wilts and dies, we move on to the next thing, or we knew that was we expected the flower to die. But when we come to humans and our attachment in an ego way to that, we lose sight of that letting go, even if it's just human nature and emotions and what we believe and what we hold on to, those little deaths. So if we practice treating everything in our daily lives like the flower and go, so I don't have the house anymore, or practice saying, even in any given moment, I don't have that belief system anymore.
Right.
Instead of fighting to hold on to it. These are all practices that lead us to the moment of the ultimate letting go, which is the death of ourselves or the death of someone. And that's why I say, I feel like for you, this transformative experience is such a blessing and a tool and a lesson for us, because you practiced those small deaths. And even last week in our conversation, we had this long piece about letting go of belief systems and how disorienting it is and how chaotic it feels and how fearful it feels to let go of that. Well, that's how people usually experience the death of themselves or someone else, because they haven't practiced it along the way. And so that's why I think you are the poster child for practice your small deaths along the way so that you can actually experience transformation and rising above things and learning from them. So when these big things hit, we can all learn so much, as well as that you're learning from it too.
And Julian's giving us a gift right now. He's saying, that it says Transcended Explorer on his photo. He's saying, take that.
Yes.
Become the transcendent explorer through this experience.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, that's that. We were just having a conversation, my mother and I, in the car, about the name of the blog and how, it's Stillness in the Storm. Well, our lives are a storm of constant events and things that are always happening.
Yeah.
And when we try to hold on to one thing or another, it's like trying to hold on to a sandcastle that when the tide's coming in. It's just never going to happen.
Right, right.
And that's when you're in the storm, is when you're trying to like hold all the pieces together that are trying to expand and be transformed anew.
Okay, and that's the global hook right now too. AI is trying to take the mass consciousness and get us again hooked on immortality. They're giving us the image of, oh, you'll stay in this body, you know? And it's like, no, it's another distraction. It's another distraction of hoping for immortality within this existence. I don't think so.
Right. And I mean, if you think about the consciousness of that space, you know, if I was to compare, I can either embrace the transformation that Julian's had, or I can try to hold on to the past. Mm-hmm. Which one is the fear or love choice, right? Well, it's embracing the transformation, and to me, that's the love choice. Mm-hmm. And I'm not in fear. I'm not trying to hold on to the body or hold on to what he was to me or whatnot. I'm trying to embrace what has actually happened, what is. And the grandeur and perfection of what is so beyond my limited idea of what I think it means to me that, you know, even just a slight crack, I mean, that's what happened yesterday. It was like a slight crack of this door of new possibility opened in my mind and heart, and it was just like an orgasm of new experience that I just never would have even thought possible. Yeah. You know, and in that moment, I felt so incredibly close to Julian. Like, it's like I could literally feel etheric arms being enshrouded around me.
Yes, so, and that's so real. I mean, that's the part I just really hope we can gift to people today, is that it's consciousness. It's with us. These people, these beings stay with us. We are so connected like that. And if we can begin to experience, like you said, it's an incredible gift. It's as expanding as watching a new birth. And I've been at both ends. Birth and death, they're similar. You feel that spirit release, and it's unencumbered. And that spirit is still talking to you. Still talking to you.
Right. No, exactly. I mean, one thing I realized, and I'll just speak to this for a minute, is that when I ask myself the question, you know, well, what does this mean? What is the lesson here? What can I gain? I realized that there's so many little moments of passion that I wanted to express, but I didn't because, you know, maybe we had a fight the previous day, or, you know, maybe he was in a funky place, or whatever the situation is. And there's many excuses we have to not do something, you know, and what that kind of taught me is that, or did teach me, was that you know, you've got to embrace your passion now, because, you know, not to put a scare on it, but tomorrow may not come. But more specifically, the conditions that are here right now are here right now, this one time. Tomorrow it'll be a different situation, and you may be able to do the same thing, but you have an opportunity to embrace the now in a way that you may not have ever be able to do before. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do. And, you know, I had to resolve that understanding, though. My mother would always say, don't ever leave the house angry. You don't know if I'll be here, you know, and it scared the shit out of me.
Right,
but yes, in this physical reality, fulfilling our passion and saying those beautiful things to each other, just knowing this is a precious moment. However, I came from an abusive childhood, and my father was one of the assailants. And before he died, I had come to some resolution within myself and had communicated to him that I was in a different place. Now, my letter got intercepted, and it was never given to my dad. So my dad died. And what happened was, I have to honestly say, my relationship with my dad continued, and actually my relationship is so much healthier now, not because he's out of my life, but because he got released and I communicated with him, and I genuinely have felt his apologies and asking for forgiveness. And I think this is a really critical point, because You can continue your relationships after someone has left the physical body. And even if you have moments of, oh my gosh, I wish I had shared this passion, you pull that spirit in right beside you and you say, you are here with me right now. And I'm celebrating it with you. Just which is like opening the show with the intention. Julian is here right now. And the intention is I want Julian to feel all the love that is happening here right now, and that we are wishing him peacefulness and ease in this transition, because we don't understand all of it. And that's the Buddhist understanding. Keep talking to the consciousness. We never die. And you can resolve and heal. You can grow old with that spirit. So I think it's really important to know we continue. And that's why we can say, in this moment, I've healed my family. I've healed the past. I've healed the future. This is my now. In this now moment, nothing is to regret. And I can love everything. And when you change your past, it becomes your now.
Right.
You know, like I no longer think, oh, I come from a past of abuse. It's like, no, I come from in this moment, I had a past of love.
Mm-hmm.
All right?
Right. Yeah, I think that's the experience of regret is for that purpose. That's what I got out of this, because
yeah,
you know, the photo that I used for the memorial of Julian, he's standing on a rock and he's looking up at the sun, and him and my mother went on a walk within like the first week of us getting here, and when we first got here, I was kind of in a funk, and you know, I wasn't feeling too happy, and they both asked me if I wanted to come, and I said no, you know, I don't want to come. And when I was preparing that blog post and I was looking for an image to use, I saw that image, and I felt like this anvil of regret because I didn't go on the walk, you know, and I didn't get to see him in that moment when he was like enraptured by light, and then all of these other regrets came up that I didn't, you know, tell him I love him enough, or I didn't, you know, give him a last kiss, or, you know, the laundry list piles up. And you know, we're kind of taught in this new age belief that, you know, you shouldn't be regretful. So as soon as you have regret, you got to just wipe your mind clean, and, you know, and for me in my process, kind of like what you were saying, Rebecca, I feel like I have to be in both. My foot has to be in reality, but also in the ideal. You know, I have, the truth is that if I'm feeling that, I can't ignore it, because what happens when I ignore it? Well, now it's not in my focus and I can't do anything with it. I can't transmute it. I can't learn from it. So I kind of learned to embrace that feeling of regret. And what it really taught me was that all of the little things that maybe we bickered about, or that weren't, you know, our relationship wasn't perfect. I'm not going to lie. We had problems. But in that moment of regret, I realized that all of that stuff can be wiped clean if we're really willing to just forgive and raise our vibrations. And I mean, that's kind of the theme that Corey has been talking about a lot. And when I read that message, I mean, I knew it was powerful, but I've literally got to live it in the past 4 and 5 days, you know, and to the point where, you know, there's people that I haven't, it's not that I've avoided, but, you know, I've just been so busy, and I'm like, you know what, I just need to let all that go and embrace this moment now, because that's what regret is for. And regret is to teach you now to embrace what's happening, because you don't need regret if you embrace the now. You know what I mean?
That's it.
So,
and maybe that won't continue to occur because you're refining your tools around regret.
right.
So I came in sort of in the middle. I had to check in on my daughter, but what came up for me listening to Blue speak about her relationship with her father and going back through it, and, you know, changing the story of what happened, and then, you know, our conversations about regret, and it made me kind of reflect back on my first profound experience with death. I'd had a few before that, but they were like, you know, my great-grandmother, or, you know, people that, and I was so young. But my father got sick when I was 13, and he passed when I was 16. And so I was that girl. That was my story. I was the girl who'd lost her father, who was strong and independent and pushed on through it all. And And my story was that I had this amazingly spiritual, wonderful father, and oh my gosh, she lost her father. And I was actually living with him and not my mother. So I felt, again, the universe was gifting me something unbeknownst to me, which is that I was able to be with him through his process of letting go of this human form. And interestingly enough, I don't have any regrets about how I handled that. But when I look at my mother and her aging process on a daily basis, when we get into it, or, because we're so different, I think about her eulogy that I'm going to probably have to give at some point. And even those moments of getting into it with her and, and fighting my own ego going, she's getting old, you're going to regret having this confrontation with her. And I say, no, I'm not going to change my life and my interaction and my passion or disdain for this woman because she's getting old. I'm going to continue to live in these moments with her and accept that I'm not going to regret those because this is part of our life. But it's interesting because for whatever reason, I was born being able to work on these subtle realms. And so when I look at my brother versus me and my father's death, that I was present through it all and supportive of him. And, I was the only one that stayed the night in the hospital with him. I was the only one that brought him his mountain climbing books and his spiritual stuff. And I was the only one brave enough to do that. And my stepmom was off having an affair because she couldn't handle it. My brother wasn't actually living with him at the time. But to this day, my stepmom is still not over him or his death. So we talk about 3 days or 30 years that she hasn't been brave enough to be in her own fear, this idea of stepping up and being fearful, but knowing that you're fearful and handling those things. And so for me, my father's death was this really profound exploration. It really was the catapult for me to delve into my own understanding of spirituality and my higher self. And I teach psychology. And in the last section of what I teach about death and dying. And it wasn't until I taught that course that I realized what a gift his death was to me, because I teach this death and dying process so differently than anybody else would teach it. And the students are so fearful of the topic, and we approach it from such a different place. But again, I also realized that I was that story of the poor little 16-year-old that was so strong and so brave that lost her father. And about 4 years after being very high functioning, and I think it's a really different experience to lose a parent figure at such a young age like that, when you're just becoming independent, you still really need them. And he was kind of like what I didn't know at the time, but he was my cord to my spirituality, and everyone else in the family thought I was crazy, but he was that person. And so when he passed, I lost that connection to something that grounded me in this strange way I thought and functioned. And so I became really high functioning. I got through college with, high academics. I went on to do other stuff. And about 4 years after he passed, I fell apart. Just quit paying my bills and didn't give a shit about anything. It didn't last so long. But I remember my stepmom saying to me, well, we were just all waiting for you to fall apart. We were wondering when you would fall apart. We were waiting for you to heal from this. And it took me about another 10 years to realize that you guys are all full of shit, that we don't heal from these things. And if I set the expectation on anyone else to heal from something like this, or myself to heal from something like this, then we can never fully experience the depth of our own duality that we spoke of, that it's not about healing, it's about transformation. And so I came to this new understanding of his death as such a gift for me, because I wouldn't be who I am today if he had not given me the opportunity to go deeper into my big S self. And I would not be functioning like I am, have the thought processes I have, connect with people on such a deeply profound level, which feeds my soul, if he had not given me the gift of passing. And he, like the snake that was caught in the net, dying for 5 days, didn't fight it. And, we have all this chaos around us when things become unbalanced, or, our belief systems, i.e. living in this human body, ultimately fall away and we're dying, a belief system dying, our physical body's dying, and to see a snake not fight it and psychically connect with Blue and say, I'm gifting you this process. I'm not fighting this. I fully accept this. And my father was very much like that too. He never fought it, and he had a really profound outlook on it. And he actually, when his diagnosis got to the point where he only had 6 months to live, and he couldn't work anymore anyway, he took off to China and Tibet, climbed the first rung of Mount Everest, and prayed with the Tibetan monks. And I didn't know if he would come home. But it's, again, not fighting it, not having any regret for himself about how he lived his process. But my realization in this moment is that I don't have any regret around how I connected with him through his dying process. But in life in general, I surround myself with constantly evaluating whether I'm going to regret something or not. And I've gotten to the place with that where I go, no, because this moment is this moment. And again, those lower centers, those base emotions need to be experienced if we're going to grow beyond that even. So, we talk about regret in death. We regret not spending enough time. We regret not saying I love you enough. But when do we get to the point in our own consciousness in this body living this life where regret simultaneously is evaluated and let go of, because the moment we're in is exactly the moment we're supposed to be in, whether we're in the pot of boiling water or we're in our anger or we're in our blissful love, that everything in its moment is exactly the way it should be in that moment. And if we fight it, we don't experience it and transmute it and transform it. We just live in this place of regret. So that when the ultimate letting go happens, we look back and we regret moments. And as Blue said, if that is the case, then obviously we can change our story around it and still communicate with people after they've passed. But for me, it took a long time to change the story of me being that girl that lost her dad that everybody looked at, waiting to see when I would get over it. When I woke up one day, I went, I'm not going to heal from this, and I don't want to. I'm not going to heal, because if I heal, that means I'm pushing it away. I'm going to use it to transform me. And the minute I made that connection and that realization about a decade ago is when I started owning my power and this story in a different way for myself, and felt so much closer to him in that way. So it took me 20 years, took you 3 days. It's a different time. But it speaks to, I think, developmentally and also circumstantially how I think if I would have lost him now, or, losing my mother in the next decade or whatever, I look at my brother's process, who never really dealt with my father's death. And he's super anxious about my mother's aging, but he also doesn't have a daily practice of challenging his own belief systems and being a truth seeker. And he's a bit neurotic around those. I can see his chaos emerging and his anxiety emerging when anything shifts his belief system. So his belief system of my mother being this young person who will take care of him emotionally is shifting. And I can see his anxiety around it. And I look at it and I just, there's no part of my being that gets anxious about the realization or the day of her death. It's just another part of life. And so.
And there you have it. It's unpredictable. It's like what Justin's sharing, is that he doesn't know what the next moment's going to be. As a memory goes through you, you don't know all of what is going to be revealed to you. Mm-hmm. So we don't know. Every transition is different. And that's why, just looking at our everyday affairs, we have a lot of opportunity right now to practice.
We do. I mean, that's the bigger picture aspect of it. I'm really embracing, is that there's so many, like I was saying earlier, in the microcosm of the relationship between Julian and I, just like any relationship, there's always these little things that you don't want to let go, or you get angry at, and they kind of build a wall between you and your significant other. And eventually it gets to the point where, you're living like a tenth of the capacity of what you could be doing with this person, and then in that moment of death, in the moment of them not being there, you're willing to let all of that shit just go completely out the window. I mean, anything that could have happened, it's all on water under the bridge at that point. So really, I mean, and this is, I think that's why the program on Earth is to fear death so much. Because if we really embraced it fully, like if as a daily practice, you thought of all the people that you had some gripe with, whether it's somebody in your family or it's somebody online or another blogger that doesn't agree with what you think the truth is or whatnot, and you just imagined, well, what if this person wasn't here anymore? You know, what if they died tomorrow? You know, what would you still hold it against them? You know, could you move past all of your grudges and embrace the beauty and an essence of what they did bring in their life? You know, could you do that and forgive them and move on and integrate? You know, I think that's the big lesson that we're all learning as a planet right now, is that we're so fundamentally divided, yet we're so fundamentally interconnected. And it's the only reason that this separation maintains itself is because we keep trying to fight the fights, and you know, let's just let all of that go. We've got way more to work with. There's so much beauty we can embrace in this life if we're just willing to let these moments of regret come to the fore, experience them, learn from them, embrace them, and then forgive.
I think that you're speaking to the antidote to diversity, what we were talking about last week, is that, you know, we keep having divisiveness and positions. One's good, one's bad, and we get in this opposed place. Now, that's part of the enslavement. But if we can forgive now, it doesn't mean you agree with them, but if we can start to forgive, we release the duality of that contradiction. We release duality. There is a place, and if you're in a conscious dying place, that it doesn't friggin' matter if those facts were correct, or if this person was, they were devious, or this gave you disinformation. When you step back, it doesn't matter. And that's how it could really help us. I want to say something real quick. I might disappear for a little bit, and I'm going to come back on my iPhone.
Okay. So the other aspect that brings up for me is what stories are these people reinforcing in ourselves? You know, we talk about a partner, or even someone who's blogging and being oppositional to you, or, you know, a contradictory belief system and antagonizing you. But again, it's one of those things where, what if all of those people disappeared that are feeding parts of your neurotic story? Then we'd be left with ourselves. And so am I going to feed myself this neurotic story? Because I've been relying on you to do it for me. You know, my behavior is asking you to react to me in a way to reinforce my bullshit. Right. You know, reinforce the fact that I might not be good enough or smart enough, or I have this incapacity to blah, 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 you know, or that, you know, I will not produce work unless I'm antagonized and challenged.
You are going to keep that neurotic story. In fact, Justin, if I can use you as an example, at some point in your process, you're gonna review some of the programs, some of the neurotic programs that you had with Julian, right? And you're going to recognize he's not here anymore, and you still got him.
And you still have them. So I think
it's going to be so blatantly obvious. You gotta heal that shit.
Right, you're going to be gnawing your own arm off in the middle of the night because you don't want him to do it anymore.
That's got to be the follow-up show when you start to write down the list of, holy shit, I thought Julian always made me go fucked up here, you know?
Yeah.
Right.
But really, I think that's part of the conditioning, and I think that's what I wanted to speak to you about the stories, is that you were saying either, you know, divided or interconnected, and I almost want to say codependent or interconnected, because we rely so much on each other to feed our negative story. And I think that's the conditioning, is that we have been entrained to treat each other in ways where we enforce each other's negative aspects, as opposed to having a conscious death around all of that, which you were speaking to in terms of, you know, what if we let go of all of that? You know, in everybody, in every day, in every way, just let go of the opposition and let go of this idea that you're reinforcing my negativity and neuroses, and I'm reinforcing yours. And, you know, what if that other blogger that gets on and contradicts you all the time, you just went, this is no longer necessary. We might have a gap where we don't function and aren't producing as much or don't feel as connected to our partner. But I think if we create that stillness and that spaciousness without functioning with this old contract, then we're basically saying, I do not consent.
Mm-hmm. And it's a conscious death. And
right. I have just consciously killed all of you motherfuckers and myself, and I don't consent to you reinforcing the story that no longer serves me anymore. I'm going to produce authentic, brilliant work without antagonism. I'm going to be connected intimately to my partner without feeling the need to have to regret what I just did and then reconnect, or feeling like I'm not worthy enough, and the only way I'm worthy enough is to stay connected to you because you're my value of self-worth. What if we practiced every day, like you said, Justin, to kill off all of those aspects of those relationships where it doesn't serve us anymore?
Mm-hmm.
And the stories that we tell ourselves, we might sit in our own shit for a little bit of time going, oh my gosh, I thought they were gnawing my arm off, but I'm actually gnawing my own arm off. And I was just asking you to step up and do it for me. Mm-hmm. So then we're free from this way we've been entrained to believe and be disconnected and divided and codependent around our own neuroses. And then we can have spaciousness to really, truly be interconnected and sit with our inner diversity and our diversity with each other. So,
right. I mean, that's really the big theme that I've kind of walked away with, is that, you know, I'm not saying that we should forgive and that means if somebody's beating us to the floor, we just roll over. I mean, that's not what forgiveness is. Yeah. But for forgiveness, to define it, you know, as in a personal way, forgiveness is you allowing yourself to open up and embrace the truth. Yep. And not just cherry pick the thing that allows you to hold on to anger so you can ignore the truth. Mm-hmm. You know? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And really, I mean, just to speak to the specifics of Julian's passing, is the hospital ignored us. They ignored his condition. Mm-hmm. You know, Julian had Mass Health, which is like the Massachusetts version of Medicaid, which means the doctor's not really going to make any money treating Julian. Mm-hmm. You know, and he's got, you know, and the level of negligence and insensitivity to what he was going through in the hospital. I mean, it was all I could do not to just completely explode in the hospital. I was just happy. I mean, I already have a lot of kind of a lack of appreciation, to say it nicely, for the medical institution and the way they do things. And you know, I could very easily, instead of facing this experience, allow myself to get angry and blame the doctor for not doing this or that. Blame myself for not maybe pushing him harder to, you know, eat better or whatnot. And in that space, that's when we're not in forgiveness, because we're trying to hold on to a definition of what we think happened. Like if he just had this, if he just had that, if it coulda, woulda, shoulda, then things would be different. Right. Well, things aren't different. That's not the truth. Mm-hmm. You know, this is the truth. What actually happened is the truth. And it may seem like a dichotomy to say that I can forgive the doctor, or I can forgive the hospital staff, or I can forgive Julian or myself for not doing X, Y, Z. Well, without also being complacent, you know. You know, what happened with Julian was a reminder that the reason we do things in life is for not just one reason. There's multiple reasons, but, you know, to put some specifics on it, the reason we eat food is for emotional sustenance, especially in today's world. We don't eat food because it makes us healthy. We eat food because it feels good. It feels good to eat chicken. It feels good to eat a burrito. It feels good to eat pizza. It gives us emotional comfort, and we can't deny that part of ourselves because that's there. It's a real need. and really we're talking about addiction of any kind, whether it's food or cigarettes or weed or heroin or alcohol. I mean, whatever it is that you have found in your life that gives you that emotional shelter, you need to forgive yourself if you hold that against you. Because if you don't forgive yourself, if you don't allow that love to come in and expand everything through acceptance, then you're not going to be able to get over it. And really, I mean, that's a huge aspect of what this experience has taught me, is that in order to move forward, in order to actually make progress, you have to be in a space of stillness, really. I mean, and you can't be in stillness if you're trying to fight tooth and nail reality itself. So this whole idea that, it's justifiable to hate somebody, it's justifiable because they did X, Y, Z, or because you did to yourself that you're unworthy, or they're unworthy, or that they don't deserve love, or they don't deserve compassion. That's what keeps us all divided and keeps the whole story, to use your phraseology. I mean, that's what kind of living in the story is all about, is, and it's a phrase that we used to use all the time, is, well, this person back in the day, I lent them $100 and they never paid me back, and I'm never going to forgive them, and they're such a horrible person, and blah, 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 blah. And you tell that to anybody who will give you the time of day to listen. Why? Because it helps you reinforce the codependency, that, in other words, the people that you hate in life, the people that you're trying to fight, you're codependent with, because they allow you to feed the story of separation inside of yourself. You know what I mean? And once you actually allow yourself to open up and just accept that this has happened, accept the whole truth, stand back, don't just focus on the wave that's bouncing up and down all over the place. See the points that are standing still in the wave.
And that comes back to our conversation about investigative reporting. What is the healthy way to take in the data and knowledge and not take a stance, not become what you're saying right now? You become codependent when you take a stance against or for someone.
Right. And that's the world we live in now, is if I'm pro Blue Star, I must be anti somebody else.
Exactly.
And really, it's so easy to allow yourself to slip into that, because underneath, the truth is there. It's trying to come out. It's like waiting at the surface, just like for you to grab it up and embrace it. But part of you is fearful because it means transformation deep down.
Yeah.
And you're getting emotional comfort, in a sense, by staying angry, by staying vindictive, or being hurt and not letting go. And that's what the catalyst of the death experience is all about, is to really teach you that it's all temporary, and ultimately we're all going back to the same place.
This also brings back last week's conversation, is about the masculine and the feminine. The masculine has been hijacked, and the new program has got to be, anything that comes up negative in our mind is not who we are. That's all part of the program. So we need that masculine healer that goes, hey, wait a minute. We don't have negative feelings here. We don't get, this is not real. And that masculine healer says, clear out of here right now. I'm protecting the divine feminine. She is to be revered, respected, and loved. And that's the person that's the essence of inside each of us that wants to be loved. This negativity is not our program. All right, I'm going to intentionally leave so I can go over to the iPhone. I'm sorry, I have to interrupt that.
Okay, we'll see you in a minute.
Okay, I'll be back.
It also reminds me of how I think evolutionarily we're looking at even emotions that don't serve us anymore. We spoke last week about regret being one of those things that satiates us and makes us feel full. Why do we judge people? Because it makes us feel good. That's what we do. It feeds that story that I am in control and that you are doing something that does not fit my belief system. So I'm going to force you through my anger, my rage, my judgment, to force you to behave in a way that reinforces my story. And when you said, why do we eat? Because it feels good. It's not about nourishing ourselves. Why do we judge? Because it's not because we're trying to reason and come to a common place. We're judging because it feels good. It's one of those survival instincts where it's part of an old story, and we're so conditioned to treat each other in this divisive way that we don't need to do it anymore. It's not about someone taking a club to me in a cave or a dinosaur eating me. Yet we still have this idea that that's the way we need to react and interact with one another. So yeah, it reminds me of how there's some base emotions which I just don't think in terms of evolution that are even necessary anymore, yet we're fighting with our lives. We're gorging ourselves on them because we're holding on to them as a belief system, a functioning tool that I think it's becoming obsolete, which is why I think we're so desperate to hold on to them. Because it's starting to be revealed that, our dividedness is really codependence in a really unhealthy way. And that in order to get interconnected, we have to let go of so many base, unhealthy tools. And I'm not speaking of anger. I'm speaking of the way we deal with anger. I'm not speaking of judgment in terms of protecting ourselves physically. I'm speaking of how judgment has become something that we do emotionally as a feeding frenzy. I'm not speaking of regret in terms of getting rid of it, but not living with it stifling us and keeping us frozen. I'm speaking of it as transforming it into a place where we can just observe that and go, that is just fascinating. How can I connect with you without this in place? And I think that's also why I think so much is being revealed around programming and brainwashing and the way we've been entrained to deal with each other. It's being revealed because we are growing beyond that. And at the same time, we're fighting with our lives to hold on to it because it's what comforts us. It's our pizza and burritos.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, and when we don't know anything else, in the absence of not knowing, we always go back to what we think we do know. Yeah. And that aspect of anger and frustration, it's like a feedback loop. I mean, you feel this frustration, you feel this anger. Well, that feeling can be empowering. It feels like, I'm in control. I can cast judgment. So then that creates an experience in the manifested reality. Maybe you make a funny face. Maybe you call somebody a name, whatever it happens to be. And now there's another experience. There's another layer of, bullshit basically added onto the surface. It's just like inertia. I mean, you can imagine like a wheel spinning. Of all the wheel spinning is all these negative emotions that you keep feeding into. And every time you have an opportunity to either like slow it down or to keep kicking it faster. Every time you feed into that experience of negative emotion, whatever it happens to be, you just keep piling the inertia onto it. So that means that in order to stop that wheel, it's going to take an equally strong experience to actually counter that. Yeah. If that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's kind of like the overarching theme that I'm seeing a lot lately is that in these times, there's a lot of division. But at the same time, I'm seeing a lot of people that are, saying, well, what are we feeding into this for? We have so much to work with and so much to embrace that's so beautiful and to empower ourselves with, yet we're bickering and fighting over what you happen to believe versus what I happen to believe. I mean, let's face reality, guys. We're never going to believe absolutely everything 100% equally. We're all going to have a different perspective on what is. So instead of trying to create this homogeny within our consciousness of beliefs, we need to embrace the diversity that we all each bring to the table.
Absolutely.
And that's why last week I was really sort of adamant about shifting our language to truth seeker as opposed to finding the truth, because ultimately if we practice seeking, then we're practicing everything we've spoken to today. And that we honor those moments where it's, no longer about whether it's right for you to be angry or not, or whether it's right for me to be angry or not. It becomes, I'm having an experience right now that I just need to share with you. So,
Right.
I'd like to come around full circle right now and go into a space of, because I know, Justin, you are incredibly articulate, and we've been talking as humans. And I want to invite back in the spirit of Julian and perhaps explore right now some conversations we can have with our spirit family. And I think most importantly is to come back to, like I said, yeah, I'm very influenced by the Tibetan approach to this, but I'd like to say to Julian right now, my dear brother, that I want you to know how much you are loved. And I want to hold you inside of me, especially when I'm in a place of peace and comfort and effortlessness. I want to offer that to you and acknowledge that, okay, we may not all understand exactly what you're going through because we're still in our physical bodies, but we're right next to you. You're right next to us, as are all the spirits that have passed over and all the spirits that are transitioning right now, that we love you. Humanity holds one another with great love and benevolence, and may you have no memory of fear or pain, and may you know that we're going to continue to talk with you, we're going to walk with you, we're going to write with you, and we're going to hold you close, that you are still part of this greater family. And remembering you and remembering our loved ones is what's going to continue to enhance lots of ease, lots of ease. And so what I'd like to invite Justin, Rebecca, is the words that you might share with Julian and also the loved ones that you've spoken of, that for all we know, they're still in transition.
Sure. Well, I just want Julian to know, and I've been saying this every day, is that I just love you so much, and you've transformed my life since the moment I met you. And you know, I don't know who I'd be if we didn't meet so long ago. I mean, to kind of set the context, when I met Julian, I was in the closet. I was not open about so much in my life, and I was not happy. I was depressed. I was semi-suicidal. I just didn't know where my life was going, and something happened where I needed to make a change, and I decided to try to contact somebody, and I ended up contacting Julian. And we met, and we had, you know, some nice first few dates, and we had some really good experiences. And he said, well, you know, listen, you seem like a really cool guy, but you're not out, and you know, I am, and you know, I just don't want to have that kind of experience. And in that moment, I knew I needed to make a change. And that night, I came out to my whole family.
Right on.
You know? And
oh.
I mean, it was just like, and that was just the first domino in a series of dominoes that he has guided me and influenced me to change my life. I mean, I went from, I could barely tell you my truth, to now I'll tell anybody anything. I'm to the point where I don't know if I even have any secrets anymore, because I just try to live myself so openly.
Awesome.
You know? So thank you so much for that, and you'll be missed so much, and I just love you from the bottom of my heart. And even though you're not here right now with me physically, you're here close to me in ways that I never thought possible. So thank you.
Yeah. Lots of love for you, my brother.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the transformation doesn't stop here. He's touched so many lives, and he's going to continue, and through everybody not just Julian, but everybody who's passed, all of us who are alive, all of us who have passed, all the angelic realms, even
right.
the cabal, the dark ones, everybody, we're in this together, damn it.
Yeah, that's right. And he's fucking on the other side. He better start moving and grooving things for us.
Yeah, talk about having powerful warriors now. I mean, he's a prime example of someone stepping up going, I'll go to the front lines. Let me go do this. So it's nice to know that our army of benevolence is expanding.
Oh, I like that.
Places
I like
that. We
that.
can't reach with this human body.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, it's a different experience because I've never known him in the physical realm. I've known him in the ethereal and the technological realm, but I can say that, Julian, since the moment I've met you, you have transformed me, even though it's only been a week. And that even though you're not here with me physically, you continue to live on for me in ways that is so profound. And I'm saying that a bit in jest, but when you were speaking of your relationship and your knowing of him, I went, well, me too. Yeah, me too. Yeah. But I've only known him a week.
Yeah.
So it speaks to, Julian, it speaks to who you are in your core power being, whether it's in this physical life or somewhere else, that you have graduated into the upper echelons of what it truly means to be a sacred clown and to sit with us. Mm-hmm. And I know he's laughing right now, even though I didn't know his physical realm, but energetically he's like, yeah, you got it, girl. Yeah. That he can now be the trickster in our tale, where he knows all and sees all and bees all. Uh-huh. And live without fear because he's not trapped in this. And so he can really be that force of that moment. He is that guiding light, that moment where we have full expansiveness. Mm-hmm. And in evolution, we as humans have graduated to a place where we might not be able to get there in this living body, but we connect with those that have sacrificed and gone to the front lines for us. Okay. Graduate to this place of sacred clown where they're in the most prime place of power in the most magnificent and joyful way, and we get to be in relationship to them. And I really feel like his energy is very much that place of like, I'll guide you even though you're blindly going. I'm going to guide you. And I feel like with all of our spirit brothers and sisters, if we can clear ourselves enough to have that relationship with them, he's just joined the forces of those that guide us.
Well, on the heels of that, Rebecca, as a guide, I'd like to put out a special request to our brother. We had quite a community come together in Oujda, Morocco, and everyone knows who they are. And I feel that right now, everyone is holding Julian close. And Julian, I'd like to ask you to just connect all our hearts and heal all the challenges we may have had and empower our strengths. And may we continue to be supportive of each other and recognize that we spent some really potent, powerful, significant times together. So enthuse us to continue on our journey. And so much love to that entire community, and you all know who you are. And thank you, Julian, for being a part of that.
And thank you, Julian and Justin, for coming into my life in this amazing way. It will continue to be a gift. Thank you, my brothers.
My pleasure, my pleasure. Yeah. Yeah,
So,
I think that's a great message, is that, you know, we all have so much to work towards, and really it doesn't mean that we have to agree with each other, but we can agree to disagree peacefully and lovingly.
Yeah.
And still be in common unity despite our differences, and embrace the diversity that we have. And, you know, this adventure that we're on.
And I think that really sums it up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it does. So
You got cut off, but I think that
Mm.
really sums it up in terms of bringing it full circle at the end of our show is to honor our own inner diversity so that the macrocosm, we can honor the diversity of others and live interconnectedly as opposed to codependently. And I'd like that to be something that we all walk away today going, how can we, as humans, connect with each other in authentic ways with discernment and love? So blessings. Thank you, Julian, for allowing us this next step in our transformation.
absolutely. So what I'd like to suggest, unless anyone has any last words, I'd like to suggest that we have a minute of silence, and I'm going to ask Biggie to just time that minute and just close the show in silence, just holding Julian and holding all our dear ones that are transitioning in this time. Hold everyone in our hearts, and we are connected, and we're empowering each other. But before we go into that minute of silence, Justin, I want to thank you so much. I'm just so grateful and so honored to have this time with you. And Rebecca, as usual, I love doing Get Lit with you. Justin, would you like to say any parting words before we go out in silence?
Just that I thank you guys for giving me this opportunity. I'm really happy that I had the chance to share and celebrate his life and what this has all meant to me, and hopefully that in sharing my experience and making this part of myself shareable, that it could help others in their path and what they're going through. So thank you guys so much.
Right on. You're so welcome.
You're welcome. Blessings to all.
Blessing to all with so much love. Biggie, just give us a minute of silence and please blessed closure with the show.